Hello everyone, welcome to the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I'm of course your host TJ. I'm coming to you today to talk about a new movie that just dropped on Netflix last weekend, Night Always Comes. Now, as the little tag I put on this video suggests, I am a much bigger fan of this movie than I was of Anora, which of course won Best Picture last year at the Oscars, and I think that was an injustice, but I don't want to get too much in this. But I do think this movie is a better, more insightful film about the nature of poverty and how it sort of constricts our choices, particularly those of young women, who are sex workers and or have mental health issues. So it stars Vanessa Kirby, who's having a great year, frankly, as Lynette. And when the movie begins, we see her sort of framed against her rundown house in Portland, blood along her back, and we're like, oh my God, what's happened? So as it turns out, the day before, she was supposed to co-sign with her mother for a loan to get $25,000 to put a down payment on the house, but her mom ended up spending the money on a car, and so in basically like a few hours over one night, she had to raise that money, and she goes to increasingly desperate lengths to do so. She engages in sex work, which she's already done with one of her regular Johns. She steals a safe from one of her fellow sex workers' apartments, and like breaks it open. She has a run-in with her coworker who takes her to like this guy who breaks open this shelf, but she may accidentally kill someone. And she, all the while, at a certain point, she picks up her older brother who has Down syndrome, and he's along for this kind of like weirdly poignant odyssey that Lynette goes on. And I think that, much like other films like Anora and also shows like Shameless, one of the things I really enjoyed about this film and that I found most moving was the extent to which it demonstrates like grinding poverty. When you are a person who has no other resources, when you are like one step away from homelessness, you will do anything and everything to make sure that that's not the case, even when there's probably a part of your brain, and we as the audience certainly know that there's no hope that this is all going to be a waste of time, because when you're trapped in this cycle, it's almost impossible to get out. And I will give Vanessa Kirby so much credit for giving us such a rich and wonderful and textured and terrifying performance. Terrifying, I say, because it's really kind of devastating, the extent to which, she is fighting so hard for her family and for herself and to overcome the darkness of her past. And I really think that's a really powerful kind of story. And I think that the early parts of the film play out very much like a horror movie. Like there's this radio chatter that talks about the cratering economy and how everyone is basically living paycheck to paycheck, and how all it takes is like one financial disaster to spell like doom for too many people in America. We then get several shots of like homeless encampments. Now again, I want to point out and emphasize that the homeless folk are not the source of the terror, because that would be horrible. Instead, the film suggests that they are the result of this horrible economic system, and because we are then led to see Lynette and to understand her motivations and why she does what she does, it helps us to sort of ground us and understand why she as a person would go to such radical lengths in order to make a better life for herself and for her brother, even if as she does so, she almost inadvertently like ends up creating far more chaos than I think she actually intended to. And obviously, like I said, Vanessa Kirby is fantastic, but I also want to give a lot of credit to Zach Gottsagen, who plays her brother, Kenny. And I'm really glad this film did not make Kenny the butt of the joke. They didn't make him this abject figure. They didn't make him, they didn't use other characters to make fun of him because of his Down syndrome. And I have my cousin's daughter, so my first cousin once removed, has Down syndrome, and so I was really glad to see him treated as a person as opposed to this stock figure of fun. And I think that's a really big move when it comes to disability representation, even if he's not the main character. I think that's important. And Jennifer Jason Leigh plays Doreen, who is Lynette's mother. Now, I think that she's a bit underused, but I do still, like, she has the same kind of world weariness that we have associated with many of Lee's characters recently, and so I enjoy getting to see that again. And then Randall Park is Lynette's John. Also, he has a very brief walk-on role, interesting. And then also Stephan James, who plays Cody, her black coworker, underused. But again, it's an interesting point because the film doesn't sort of lionize or valorize Lynette, and she is capable of like pretty horrible things and also some not so subtle racism. And so I think that, the film keeps us from ever fully seeing her as like, this noble figure. She's a very broken person trying to do the best she can in a world that is fundamentally rigged against people who do that, and in which again, many people live not just paycheck to paycheck, but are literally on the edge of actual like being unhoused. Or I think that's a really potent message, and maybe in another year this movie wouldn't play with quite as much poignance or resonance, but it certainly does in the year of our Lord 2025. And I think, as I said, it's a bit, because it lacks the sort of excesses and I think self-indulgence that Anora sometimes gets in its own way, and it's a little too in love with its own cleverness. I think that, what makes Night Always Comes so gripping is that it's a social drama film that has some really important and potent things to say about the nature of poverty in the U.S. So it definitely gets the Pisces Guide to the Pop Culture Seal of Approval. It made me feel things. We know that's a big message here at Pisces Guide. It's a movie that makes you think and makes you feel, and to me that's the mark of a truly great cinematic adventure, or cinematic achievement. So definitely gets the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. It is streaming on Netflix, so go check it out. Very easy to access. So definitely would recommend watching it because it is a very terrific and gripping film. So anyway, that's all I have for today. So as always, I just like to say thank you so much for joining me here at the Pisces Guide to Pop Culture. I'm your host, TJ. Take care, y'all.